Imagine two young boys, one barely 12, the other only 9, locked behind the cold stone walls of the Tower of London. They were heirs to the throne of England, princes born into privilege, promise, and peril. One summer, their laughter simply stopped. They vanished into the shadows, never to be seen alive again. Who silenced them? Who stole their future? And with it, England's crown? For centuries, one name has lingered like a curse: Richard III. But was he truly the murderous uncle who smothered his nephews in their sleep? Or just the most convenient villain in history's darkest whodunit? Stay with me until the end, because the latest discovery, a single chain passed down in a will, might finally tip the scales in this 500-year-old cold case. The year was 1483, a kingdom teetering on the edge of chaos. England had just lost its king, Edward IV, a man whose towering presence had dominated the bloody Wars of the Roses. His death was sudden, unexpected, and left the throne perilously vulnerable. His heir, Edward V, was no seasoned warrior or calculating statesman. He was a boy of 12, bright, eager, but hopelessly unprepared for the ruthless politics of a fractured realm. His younger brother, Richard of Shrewsbury, was barely 9. Together, they represented not just innocence, but instability. And in medieval England, a child king was never simply a ruler in waiting. He was a spark, a dangerous spark, one capable of igniting rivalries, conspiracies, and outright war. Every noble house, every ambitious magnate suddenly saw the opportunity to seize influence or seize the crown itself. Into this maelstrom stepped Richard, Duke of Gloucester, the dead king's younger brother, and the prince's uncle. On paper, Richard was the natural choice to act as Lord Protector. His duty was clear: safeguard his nephews, defend their throne, and guide the kingdom until Edward came of age. But in the brutal chessboard of medieval power, titles often masked intentions. Protector could mean savior or executioner. Within weeks, Richard had moved swiftly and decisively. He intercepted Edward V on his journey to London, separating the boy from his mother, Elizabeth Woodville, and her Woodville family, whom Richard mistrusted and despised. Under the pretense of safety, Edward and his younger brother were escorted to the Tower of London. The Tower, after all, was not yet the sinister prison we imagine today. It was a royal residence, a fortress, and a symbol of authority. Housing the princes there seemed reasonable on the surface, but hindsight casts a darker shadow. What was framed as protection quickly became isolation. The boys' world shrank to stone walls, barred windows, and iron gates. Their freedom was gone, their protectors stripped away. And history would not remember the Tower as their sanctuary. It would remember it as the place where their laughter faded, where their lives were swallowed by silence, and where two princes stepped into legend as the most famous missing children in English history. At first, the princes were seen playing in the Tower gardens. They waved to crowds. Servants and courtiers reported catching glimpses of them in their chambers. Then the sightings grew rarer. By late summer, the two boys had disappeared from public view altogether. No funerals, no bodies, no explanation. What happened inside those thick stone walls? Theories bloomed like weeds. Some whispered that Richard had quietly ordered their deaths, strangling them to remove any threat to his fragile claim. Others pointed fingers at the Duke of Buckingham, a powerful ally who might have struck independently. Still others speculated that Henry Tudor, the future Henry VII, orchestrated the crime from exile, hoping to stain Richard's reign with blood. But the simplest explanation, Richard killing the boys himself, remained the most damning. After all, within weeks of their disappearance, he crowned himself King Richard III. The timing was chilling, and yet the true story was just beginning to twist. Decades after the princes vanished into silence, the story of their fate was not told by eyewitnesses, but by chroniclers writing under a new dynasty, the Tudors, and their pens dripped with venom. Thomas More, the famed humanist, wrote an account that would send chills down the spine of every reader. In his version, Richard III was no reluctant protector, but a calculating murderer. More claimed that Richard gave the fatal order himself, entrusting the task to a loyal knight, Sir James Tyrrell. Tyrrell, according to the tale, entered the boys' chamber one night. While they slept, innocent and unguarded, he pressed pillows against their faces. Slowly, The prince's desperate breaths were smothered into silence. Their small bodies, lifeless, were buried hastily beneath a stairwell, hidden away like an inconvenient truth. The Italian historian Polydore Virgil, writing in service to Henry VII, echoed this account, reinforcing the damning portrait of Richard as the architect of his nephew's deaths. And then came the playwright who would etch Richard's image into eternity, William Shakespeare. In his tragedy, Richard was deformed in body and in soul, a man twisted by ambition, whose lust for power knew no bounds. On stage, he was not merely a king, he was a monster, a usurper, a child killer. Shakespeare's Richard III became the definitive villain of English history. But there was a catch. All these voices belonged to men writing under Tudor rule. Henry VII, the man who toppled Richard and claimed the throne, needed Richard's reputation blackened beyond repair. After all, Henry's claim to the crown was fragile, stitched together through distant lineage and victory on the battlefield. By painting Richard as the uncle who murdered two helpless children, the Tudors not only justified their rule, but ensured the world would never mourn Richard's fall. So we must ask, were these chroniclers recording history or rewriting it? Were they uncovering a crime or constructing the perfect villain? Because if Richard was not the murderer, then the question becomes even more unsettling. Who was? In 1674, nearly 2 centuries after the disappearance, workers renovating the tower made a grim discovery. Beneath a staircase, they found 2 small skeletons, carefully buried. The bones matched the age of the missing princes. The remains were placed in Westminster Abbey, entombed as the lost heirs of Edward IV. It seemed like confirmation. But there was a problem. The staircase where they were found didn't even exist in Richard's time. Were these really the princes or the victims of some other hidden crime? And without DNA testing, the bones remain mute witnesses, trapped between myth and truth. Before we push deeper into the mystery, let me pause here. If you're drawn into this web of betrayal, murder, and unanswered questions, then make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. This channel dives into history's darkest corners, murders, scandals, and secrets most people never hear. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next in this case, because a recent discovery may finally give us Richard III's fingerprint on the crime. Leap forward more than 5 centuries into our own time. For years, historians believed the trail had gone cold, that nothing new could possibly surface to shed light on the fate of the princes in the tower. But in 2023, a discovery cracked open the silence. Professor Tim Thornton, trawling through dusty archives, came across an unassuming document, a will dated 1522, belonging to Lady Margaret Capel. At first glance, it seemed like any other legal record, a noblewoman passing down her belongings to her son. But nestled among the bequests was a startling detail. She left him the chain of the young King Edward IV. Not just any chain. This was a personal item that had once belonged to the lost boy king himself. How did it survive? And more importantly, how did it end up in the possession of Margaret Capel? Here's where the story turns sinister. Margaret Capel was connected by marriage to none other than Sir James Tyrrell, the man whom Tudor chroniclers accused of smothering the princes at Richard's command. The implications are chilling. Did Tyrrell keep the chain as a token of his crime, a grim trophy snatched from the boy he killed? Did he pass it into his family's hands, where it was quietly preserved, its true meaning whispered across generations? Or was it used as proof, evidence to show his master that the deed had been done? This is no ordinary artifact. It is the closest thing historians have ever found to a physical link between the vanished Edward V and the man said to have ended his life. A fragile thread of gold reaching across 5 centuries, tugging at the heart of the mystery. Yet, as with every twist in this case, not all scholars agree. Some see the chain as damning evidence, a relic binding Richard III's accused assassin to his victim. Others dismiss it as circumstantial, a coincidence wrapped in too much speculation. So is this chain the long-sought smoking gun, or just another ghost story dressed in gold? Supporters of the chain theory see it as the missing puzzle piece, the smoking gun proving Tyrrell carried out the crime on Richard's orders. But Richard III's defenders, the Ricardians, aren't convinced. They argue the chain could have been stolen, gifted, or wrongly attributed. They accuse Tudor propaganda of twisting every shred of evidence to blacken Richard's name. And so the debate rages on. Every artifact, every scrap of testimony, pulled between two poles. Richard the ruthless child killer, or Richard the slandered king. And if you think this story can't get more twisted, wait until you hear about the possibility of solving it through science. In our age of forensic breakthroughs, it's tempting to believe that science could finally silence the whispers that have haunted this mystery for more than 5 centuries. Could DNA testing unlock the truth that history has guarded so jealously? The answer may lie beneath the marble floor of Westminster Abbey, where the supposed bones of Edward V and his younger brother Richard have rested since the 17th century. If those remains could be tested, and their DNA compared with the confirmed genetic profile of Richard III, discovered in 2012 beneath a Leicester car park, then at least one piece of the riddle could be solved. We would finally know whether the bones belong to the lost princes or to some other forgotten children swallowed by time. It seems like the obvious solution, and yet science collides here with the weight of royal tradition. The Abbey is no mere burial site. It is a national shrine, the final resting place of kings, queens, and saints. Disturbing the bones of royal children, even for truth, has long been seen as an act of desecration. Queen Elizabeth II, ever the guardian of tradition, firmly rejected calls for DNA analysis. For her, the sanctity of the royal dead outweighed the curiosity of the living. The question now lingers over her successor. Will King Charles III dare to break with centuries of restraint? Or will the prince's secret remain entombed forever, locked beyond reach by reverence and ritual? Even if the testing were allowed, a darker problem remains. DNA can give us identity, but not motive. It can whisper that the bones belong to Edward and his brother, but it cannot tell us whether pillows smothered their breath, whether poison stilled their hearts, or whether some other fate claimed them. Even with science, the crucial question, the who and the why, might remain unanswered. The Tower of London keeps its secrets well, and perhaps even in the 21st century, some truths are destined to remain shadows. Still, history leaves us with a haunting symmetry. The boys vanished. Richard took the crown, and every rival who might have opposed him, whether noble, cleric, or child, conveniently disappeared. It was too neat, too perfect. To Richard's enemies, it looked like the work of a man who had calculated every step, removing piece after piece from the board until only he remained. And whether or not he gave the order, the silence that followed was damning. The boys were never seen again, and Richard never proved them alive. In the eyes of the people, absence was guilt. And in the whispering corridors of power, the story spread like poison. Richard's reign, short as it was, could never escape the specter of those lost children. At Bosworth Field in 1485, when Richard was cut down and Henry Tudor rose in his place, the shadow of the princes followed him to the grave. The stain of their disappearance became his eternal legacy. No matter the evidence, no matter the centuries of debate, Richard III would be remembered not as a king, but as a killer. And yet the truth remains locked within the tower, buried beneath centuries of rumor and silence. So, did Richard III truly murder his nephews for power, or was he the perfect scapegoat for a crime committed in the shadows? The truth may never emerge, but the story of the princes in the tower reminds us of history's cruelest lesson, that power is never innocent, and sometimes the smallest victims bear the heaviest cost. If you found this journey into medieval treachery gripping, then don't let it end here. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell, so you're the first to uncover the next scandal, betrayal, or murder from the dark corridors of history. And if you're ready to dive deeper, tap the video now appearing on your screen. There, we unravel another tale of blood and power that shaped the world we live in today. Because history isn't dead, it's waiting, in the shadows, for us to uncover it.